and acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet on today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. We've got a great panel of speakers joining us tonight to talk about their experience in rural New South Wales and working as a rural generalist in New South Wales. So what I might do is ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about where they're working, and we'll start with that. So Anne, I might start with you. You were the first online. So thank you for your time. And if you could just maybe talk to us a little bit about who you are, where you work, and your current role. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Anne Tusamine. I'm a GP in Evans Head, which is in northern New South Wales. And I've been here for 10 years. I trained in the United States, so I've been a GP for 23 years. And I trained in the United States and worked at, did my training in a rural setting, and then went to a small town of 3,000 people, and then worked in an even more remote community, a Native American tribe, for 4 years. And the community only had 500 people and was 2 hours from the nearest hospital. So I think that kind of set the tone for when I wanted to move to Australia. My husband's Australian, so we immigrated here 10 years ago. And being an overseas trained doctor, we're obligated to do a 10-year moratorium in a rural area. And I was lucky enough to get Evans Head, which is a great little beach town. The scheme has worked because my moratorium's up and I'm still here and don't intend to leave. So that's a little bit about me. I work in a practice with 5 other doctors, which I think for me has been really a great number because that allows us to each have holidays and cover each other. But we're 45 minutes from Lismore, which is our main referral hospital. And it makes it challenging enough that we, need to take care of lots of things that in a more urban area would probably be, your specialist would be around the corner, which is not the case here. So that's a little bit about me. I guess I'll pass over to Trevor.
So Trevor, we might go to you next, if that's okay.
Okay. G'day everybody, Ginagay, which is the hello from the local Gumbunga people's language. I trained in WA and actually started life as a nurse and then an outdoor educator before doing medicine, and did my registrar training in Dampier, which is in the far northwest of WA in the Pilbara, a little town of 300 people with a town of Karratha nearby where I delivered babies and did emergency department. And then after finishing training, I went on a tour around the country for a year, worked in locums in little country towns in WA, South Australia, down on the Eyre Peninsula, in Mountain Victoria, Central New South Wales and Sunshine Coast. And by accident landed in the town of Bellingen, which is about 30 kilometres inland from Coffs Harbour on the mid-north coast. So a very green town. It's just under the wettest place in New South Wales and not far from the second highest range in New South Wales. So we get snow, we don't get snow, but we get frost, we get cold winters, and we get nice steamy summers, and everything's always green. So it's actually rather pretty. We generally get flooded in, make the news, but everybody stands on the riverbank and say, yeah, this is a big one or a little one, and goes about our business. So I've been in Bellingen now for 19 years. I did take a 2-year sabbatical in the middle of that, where I felt I needed a change, went off, did a bit of study, completed my fellowship in remote and rural medicine, completed a fellowship in nutritional medicine, and did quite a bit of work out at Burke in far western New South Wales. And then came back and set up my own practice to pursue some interests that I really like to follow up. I work up in our little local hospital and do emergency department and manage inpatients. I work in the local nursing home, and I have my own practice with another doctor working with me, with exercise physiologists and physiotherapists, and a nutritionist when I can get one. And now we just added an extra little layer of complexity because we actually run the pop-up COVID clinic, which is to support our town and to support, basically to provide that service to our shire. So there's a little bit to do, but I mean, I keep doing it because I keep thinking, well, what else would I do tomorrow? And I can't think of anything in the world that could be as exciting, as varied, as completely fulfilling as what I imagined when I first thought, I think I might do medicine and see how I go at that, and went off to uni. I do basically anything I want to do in any aspect of medicine up to my level of confidence. And as soon as I get to my level of confidence and I package the patient up, send them with a very comprehensive referral with 10 pages of results and everything else to a specialist in Coffs Harbour or Newcastle or Brisbane or Sydney or wherever, and demand that specialist send back a thorough assessment. And that's the beauty. When you're a registrar or a new graduate, you don't necessarily get the feeling of your power, but this thing about being a country GP, man, I love that power. You're actually the top of the tree. These people who are specialists are actually partialists. They know a lot about one thing and that's it. They don't actually know how to completely fix the patient. They don't know how to look after the patient. The patient comes back to a country GP especially and says, okay, now what? And then you need to look after them, manage them and all their various complications. And if a specialist doesn't service my patients, I don't send them to that specialist again. And they'll have to go looking elsewhere for their business. I like to send my patients to specialists that will treat them with respect, deal with all their issues, sort out the question that we send to them, and I'll say, thank you, I'll take you back now, and let's look after the whole person as they come back home, because everybody lives somewhere and they come back here to live. And when you look at the kind of practice we do, the kind of conditions we see, there is not an aspect of medicine that we have not seen through our practice and through our hospital system. Because once again, people can get very excited about high-tech city medicine, but those people still have to live somewhere, and they either live in the city or they live in the country. If they live in the country, we did a lot because the specialist is not around the corner. That's what makes it exciting. And that's what makes it really addictive. And I have a real problem with ever thinking about giving it up at this stage, though I assume that will come at some stage.
Hi guys, I've been having some issues with actually getting myself hooked into link to this, and I'm sorry Peter's been left with the job of hosting it off the cuff. And thank you very much everybody for attending. Thanks Anne, Danny and Trevor and Sue, and I hope they don't call you in. So Peter, are you still there?
I am, Charles. We've just done a brief intro from Anne and Trevor, so we just need Danny and Sue to talk a little bit about their background.
So I've been able to listen, but I could not get hold of any control panels or hook myself in. Anyway, so we've solved that one. Peter, I know you've got another meeting coming up. Very happy to take over from here. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. And I'd kind of intended to run this as a little bit of a Q&A, and I was going to start with Anne, who launched anyway, and ask questions more like, well, we kind of had a brief intro on how you migrated from the Mayo Medical School to Evans Head, not quite in the middle of nowhere, but not far away from that. And Anne, I know, has got an absolute passion for teaching. She's a fantastic doctor. Evans Head is one of those interesting little communities. You wouldn't pick it as being remote, but as Anne kind of outlined, it's just far enough away from the support systems that you need to be able to do a few things. So the things that Anne didn't tell you in the middle of that introduction was that she has a particular interest in women's health and does quite a lot of stuff in Evans Head Medical, which is a little practice tucked into an old building and set up to allow some women's health things to be done. She's also regularly has medical students. and all of them come away absolutely inspired that you know, rural medicine is a thing to do, and they want to be like Anne. It's true, Anne. They probably.
I might interrupt a little bit. I'm sounding bigger than Ben-Hur there for a second. But I did train at Mayo Medical School, and I think that's probably the reason I ran to the country, because although Mayo is not in a very big place, it's very hoity-toity academic. And as a medical student, I was always like the fifth person back in observing any procedures and rarely got any hands-on, as the King of Jordan would be, you know, and his entourage would have a whole floor of the hospital. And it was really, when I went to do my GP residency training in a hospital that only had GP registrars, that I was, you know, got to embrace everything. We had our own GP inpatient team that was led by GPs. I learned to deliver babies. I continued to work in the hospital for another 10 years and deliver babies that whole time. And, you know, learned all the skills of, you know, surgical assisting, putting in marinas, colposcopy, and, you know, waking up in the middle of the night to deliver babies. So I think that really served me well to build my confidence. But I think the thing that built it even more is when you work in a town, it wasn't a town, it was an Indian reservation of 500 people that was very far away. But it wasn't so much the distance, but more the system in the United States, where there isn't a national healthcare system. So the Indian tribe was self-funded for insurance. And when the money ran out, we couldn't refer outside the clinic. So routinely on the 8th or 9th month of the year, we didn't have any money to refer to a specialist, only what was in our little clinic, which was a dentist, a psychologist, myself, and a drug and alcohol counselor. And we had to manage everything unless it was life or death, and because there wasn't any more money. And I think that situation, even though physically it was only 2 hours drive away, sort of embracing that we could manage most of that by ourselves. And if it was life or death, we still could send people on, and building that confidence. And then the community's confidence in our team was really good. And I think we have the same thing in Evans Head, that people have a lot of confidence in us, and we can just build our skills up over time. And much like Trevor, it keeps it incredibly exciting, and you refer to people who, specialists who treat you with respect, like Sue Walowski, and then you build a team around you that you have, you know, so that you can achieve your highest skills, and you can continue learning throughout your life. I didn't do very much skin medicine before I came here, and now I do a half day of excisions every single week, and you know, just cutting off melanomas routinely. So, you know, I don't deliver babies anymore, but I do palliative care and lots of skin medicine, which I hadn't really done in the States.
Hey, look,
so,
I think that highlights the appeal of rural medicine. It allows you to cover off on a lot of things. It allows you to grow into a whole range of different things that you might be interested in. You can move across disciplines as time goes on. It's just endlessly interesting. There's endless opportunity. I'm going to throw to Sue now, because I know you're unexpectedly on call, and my previous experience with you is that it's bloody difficult to get you to turn up anywhere. Thank you so much for making yourself available. It's fantastic. So I'm going to give Sue a little bit of a wrap as well. And I have to say this because Sue took my gallbladder out for me. Sue is also one of these people that's passionate about what she does. She's got the teaching bug. She turns herself inside out for medical students, for registrars, always on call, always on tap. And I'm planning a little bit further down the track to teach her how to say no a little bit better, because she's not so good at that. Now I'm going to try a different question on you. So Sue is a proper generalist, and I think that's one of the things we look for in people with specialty training, is the ability to be a generalist, to be able to provide a range of things that are required within the community. So Sue, this is a question especially for you. If you weren't doing surgery, what would you have done?
Yeah, well, I was listening to Anne and Trevor, and it reminded me of the fact that when I came to Lismore Base Hospital as a resident millions of years ago, my whole from North Shore, you know, they said, "Oh, you're really good at surgery, you should stay on," but they wouldn't give me any surgical terms as a resident, and I really wanted to do an anaesthetic term as a resident and a surgical term and ICU term, because I knew I liked acute type of medicine. And they said, "Oh, well, you'll have to, you know, hang around here for 4 years." And I thought, I'm not going to do that. And I had a term in Lismore. And I thought I at that stage was involved in global health and with AusAid and looking at MSF that also interviewed me. And I thought, I really need to get all the skills I can get to be a rural generalist GP. And at the time, Lismore had visiting medical officers, and on each team, you work for a surgeon or 2 surgeons and a GP. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to meet a number of GPs in town who still delivered babies, who did, like Anne said, skin excisions. Here in the Northern Rivers, Lismore, Ballina, we have the highest rate of skin cancer across the whole eastern seaboard. And it was actually one of my mentors in surgery, Dr. John Graham, who talked me out of being a rural generalist GP, and said, "It's too hard, too much bloody hard work. You should do surgery."
Rubbish.
And I thought, oh, yeah, no, but I really need to learn all of these skills if I'm going to go anywhere in Australia, up north or, you know, overseas. I really need to know all these skills. And it was only Lismore that would give me those terms. And interestingly, they spoke to me as an intern from day dot when I expressed my interest. I had only done 1 term there, and I followed up with a 2nd term. And I actually just rang them up, and I think they thought I was a 2nd-year resident. And I said, "Oh, I want to do this, 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 and this." And they said, "Okay, you've been here before." It was only when the big city hospital found out I was leaving in December that they, you know, I was accosted to the surgical department for a chat to say, "Oh, this is a really bad mistake. You know, if you want to do surgery, you've ruined your whole career by signing that contract. And, you know, if you want to be a GP, maybe that's the right position. Go to Lismore then." And I packed up my flat and I packed up my little Daihatsu, and I owned everything that I owned fitted in that car, and I drove 800 kilometres to Lismore Base. I burst into tears in Newcastle. That's where I grew up, which was like the rural town of Sydney. I went to the University of Newcastle, so all the registrars when we were trainees came from Sydney for their rural term in Newcastle. So I had grown up in that smaller area, felt more comfortable, went to Sydney as a country girl to see that I could make it in the city, and hated it. It was really busy and there was heaps of traffic, and it took an hour to get to the beach, which I loved, and I swim and surf. And that's why my Lismore term was fantastic, and that's why I followed it up. But yeah, that I still remember the 13th of January, packing everything up the weekend, you know, the 2 days before, filling everything, my car up with all the positions I had, leaving a few things with my best mate in Sydney, and just cried all the way to Newcastle. And I remember my parents saying, "It'll be fine. You know, you've made the right choice. Do what makes your soul happy. You look sad now, but you'll be fine." And I remember meeting my first term with surgical Dr. John Graham and a few of the senior surgeons in Lismore who became my mentors, and they took me under their wing almost too much, because they talked me out of, they said, rural general medicine is just too hard. GPs, they work their butt off, they're really great. No, you should become a surgeon.
So
and they kind of held me to it. So after that, I wasn't still convinced, and I enjoyed general surgery, and I was, you know, tended to be good at it at school, at uni, and also was quite okay with psychiatry. So I think that's why I've ended up being a cancer surgeon with a bit of bowel and breast and melanoma interest, but particularly bowel patients and Crohn's. You have to be part psychiatrist and a third surgeon, you know, because they have so many issues
reminded me a little bit.
And you look after their entire family, which is beautiful in the country, but you often find out why they've had a flare-up of Crohn's because their mother comes in with the breast cancer or the infected gallbladder on call. I was the first girl back to Lismore. I did my training in Victoria just by chance, and started on, I was on a liver unit and did some liver surgery for a couple of years, and they were trying to entice me, or had enticed me into liver surgery and transplant. And that's when one of my former bosses knew I had my fellowship and rang me at Lismore and said, I've never had an extended holiday. I want to go sailing for 6 weeks. And that's when John, who was also a trauma and liver and transplant surgeon at North Shore, said, what the hell are you doing? You can't do transplant. You promised me you'd come back and be a rural surgeon.
So Sue, you've reminded me of a couple of things. So that whole business about the whole patient. So you might just be a general surgeon only, nearly, but you still have to deal with the person and the family. Yeah. I met a Oxford University trained surgeon who was the dean of the medical school, and his vision went on him, so he had to give up surgery. But he gave a talk and he said, look, you know, I'm part witch doctor. And I thought, yeah, what does that mean? And he went on to explain that if you're going to cut someone open, they have to believe that you can do it and that it's the best thing for them. And it's the same thing about a lot of advice that you give to people in medicine, the witch doctor part, where you get in touch with them and make them feel that they can trust you and that what you say you will have been careful about and done right is really terribly important. And it applies absolutely in surgery. I mean, every time I even cut off a bump, I think, this person has invited me to attack them with a sharp implement. Anywhere else, I'd be beaten off with a stick. It's right. A very sort of piece of faith that you have to create if you want someone to trust you to do something. And it applies very much in surgery, but across a whole lot of other things.
I say to my medical students, you know, people come and see in your clinic and they, within 30 or 40 minutes, they've told you they're passing blood per rectum, their bowel habit has changed. Maybe I always ask men and women about sexual function. And I say, you know, to the young bright-eyed students, I say, you wouldn't go to a pub and find all this out in 40 minutes, but people who've never met you entrust you in the care of whether they can have an erection, ejaculation, how their bowel is working, and then you stick a finger up their bum. Yeah. It's a, you know, you have to accept it as an honor and a privilege because most other people would go to jail for that. Yeah.
True. All right. Look, so thanks very much. I'll let you off the hook now. I just wanted to say to the students there,
one of the biggest privileges of being a rural surgeon, and I actually did it so I could be skilled up enough to also work in global health. And so we feel comfortable in the head and neck, the thyroid, parathyroids, the thorax, if we need to in a trauma, in the abdomen in particular, is easy for us. But our GPs entrust us in our care. And one of the things on the weekend, one of my colleagues who trained with me said, I can't believe you haven't got a website. And I went, oh God, I don't think I really need one. And I said, because, you know, Bob you know, I had a clinic on Monday and I said, oh, nice to meet you from Evans Head. And your GP, they're a lovely practice, you know, they'll look after you well. And I said, oh, Anne asked me who I should go to. And I was at the pub the other week and you've operated my best mate's sister and their grand. I didn't need a website because all the advertising is at the Bolo at Evans Head and at Anne Tossamine's clinic, you know, and West Ballina Medical Centre, because the GPs do entrust me in their care of their patients, and it really is a privilege. And if any of you are thinking about specialisation, we have some registrars who come up from the city and treat their juniors very badly, but I always sit them down. I'm always the one in the hospital that has to give them the talk, and the talk is, you want to be a specialist cardiologist. Who is going to refer to you if you continue to be an arsehole? The residents in ED who you're treating really badly. These are the people in your future that will make or break you. And it's not that I treat residents good or bad because of that. It's just because it's a human thing that we should all treat each other well. You know, 20% of our workforce is leaving, and that's not good enough for me. We need to make it better, and we can make it better. And I think in the country, we look after each other better.
Absolutely two-way street. What you say is absolutely right. For anybody that is thinking about specialising, in general practice, we listen to what people tell us. We learn to trust the people that we refer to as well. And that's an incredibly important part of being able to give care, you know, completely across the spectrum of things. For the things that you can't do yourself, you need to know who you can trust to do it for you. And that's a very important thing. Danny, you haven't had a bit of airtime yet. So do you want me to give you some Q&A, or have you going to tell us?
Oh, well, I'll give a little spiel if you like, and Charles, and then you can interrupt me if I'm rambling or getting boring. So, yeah, my name's Danny Ryan. I'm actually living and practicing just down the road from Trevor Cheney, and I can confirm that he lives in a beautiful part of the world. And it's funny, Evans Head too, actually my mum's family are up that way, and one of my uncles retired to Evans Head, so I could confirm that that's a beautiful place too, Anne. But anyway, that's by the by. So I sort of fell into rural general practice sort of by accident, really. I sort of...
common story.
Sorry?
I said common story.
Yes. So after sort of going through university and getting a fairly average mark, I was sent up to Gosford Hospital I stayed there for 4.5 years and sort of cycled through all the terms, and I found nearly everything interesting except surgery. I'm sorry, Sue. Mainly because I was sort of third assistant, you know, pulling on a leg for the orthopaedic surgeon or something like that. But everything else I found interesting, but I couldn't get quite passionate enough to really want to do a whole bunch of exams in it, since I sort of I didn't like doing exams. Anyway, so at the end of 4.5 years, so last 6 months was obstetrics, just because I'd done everything else. And fortunately, I'd done quite a bit of general medicine on the way through and emergency. So then I went back I'd married by that stage, and my wife and I, Anne, we went back to Sydney, and we were there for about 18 months. And I was working in general practice in southwestern Sydney with a very good friend and colleague, a very good doctor. But I sort of I didn't enjoy it, really. I found there wasn't much continuity of care because people were sort of going from one doctor to another, and the specialists were referring amongst themselves. And so patients would come in just for a script, and you'd have to try and tease out what medications they were on and who they'd seen. And, you know, you'd try and you'd do all that work, and then you wouldn't see them again until they'd seen a couple more specialists. So after 18 months of that, I thought, oh, I'll just struggle on. And but then one Saturday morning, my wife said she was a bit unhappy with her work at the time. She was working in the city in Sydney, and she said, oh, well, let's do something different. So she saw an ad in the back of one of the medical magazines for a practice on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. And I was a bit sort of reluctant at first because I thought, oh, if we leave the city, we'll somehow be missing out. I'm not sure what I thought I was going to be missing out on. I guess I'd spent all that time at uni and sort of a cool sort of inner city and thought I was pretty cool. But anyway, she persuaded me and we came up and anyway, everyone was very welcoming, I must say. And so the plan was we were going to come up for 6 months and then go back to Sydney, but we never went back, of course. She was able to get work here, and you know, I must say, it was different to the city where sort of nobody really cared whether you turned up or not. But here I found my medical and nursing colleagues were so welcoming and so just so keen to help you get settled in. They were very supportive because work included work at the local hospital, and if I had any issues with the sort of, because I was doing obstetrics as well, there was a couple of excellent GPs with great obstetric skills who were always happy to help out, and similarly doctors who were really, you know, if I was struggling in emergency, were really happy to come in and give me a hand. And and the other thing that really struck me was the continuity of care that I didn't see in the city. Was patients would come in and if they came back a second time, then they'd sort of say, "Can you be my doctor?" And you sort of said, "Yeah, sure." And then they sort of, it wasn't that they owned you, but that they sort of really valued having the one doctor that they felt that they could trust and rely on, and found that wasn't the case in the city. And so you do get to know people and you do get that continuity of care, which I think is what makes general practice satisfying. There's nowhere else in the city, you just can't practice that traditional cradle to grave medicine that I think has always been the great thing about general practice. You know, you look after the whole family, and now that I'm getting on, you know, people come up to me in the street and say, you know, oh, you know, you delivered my daughter and she's at university now, and da 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 da. So that is really quite lovely. And so that's we both, Anne, my wife, and I both settled into the community, and we sort of never wanted to go back to Sydney. And we these days, I haven't been back to Sydney now for quite some time, and I must admit the congestion and the crowds and all of that and the expense of the place is sort of, I find a bit overwhelming these days. But anyway, and I was lucky enough to our local district hospital is still run by GP BMOs, although it's sort of grown in size and busyness, more particularly in busyness, so that we no longer do emergency. We're no longer on call for emergency on our own. There's now residents there all the time, and in fact we've got some emergency medicine specialists who are there during sort of office hours and who provide the sort of expertise and training. And we don't get called into emergency that often, but we do. And in 2010, I felt I was being a little bit de-skilled because I was no longer in emergency all the time, and I'd never been really comfortable with procedural medicine. So I had the chance to take a year off. So I did anaesthetics for a year and sort of to upskill. And so now, although I've been sick in the last year or so and not working up till then, I added anaesthetics to my skills, and I found that very rewarding. And fortunately, at our local hospital, there's although they no longer do complex surgery, there's a busy day surgery unit, so that sort of we're able to keep our skills up that way.
So,
yep.
Can I just pick up on that point of adding skills to your armamentarium as you go along? So you can start out doing, you know, general practice or rural general practice, but particularly in rural areas, there's often the opportunity there that you can see where you can contribute to the local care, you can improve your contribution to the local healthcare team by picking up an extra skill, something that is almost impossible to do if you're practicing in suburban medicine.
I think that's true. I think that's very true. One of the problems with suburban medicine and suburban general practice in particular is, well, I think suburban specialists these days are sort of so hyper-specialised, you know, that they think that they must get bored, surely. I know they're making a lot of money, but they must get bored. And the other thing in city general practice is you're sort of sitting in the same chair day after day, and you've sort of, to make enough money, you've just got to see a whole lot of people. And we're fortunate in that you can develop, I think, interests, and your colleagues will be very, very supportive if you want to upskill. And I found my GP rural colleagues, you know, really happy to sort of teach me, like Anne talked about doing, you know, excisions of skin cancers, and you'll have GP colleagues who do sort of fairly complex sort of skin work, and they'll be more than happy to teach you in their rural practice. So I think that's another really good thing about rural general practice and rural practice in general, is that you'll find all your colleagues, specialist colleagues and GP colleagues will be very happy for you to, they'll encourage you to upskill, and they'll encourage you to maintain your skills. So I think, and you won't get that in the city. Yeah, I think that's true, Charles.
Yeah. Trevor, can I bring you back in there? I felt like I might have sort of cut you off in mid-swing. And I'll ask you the kind of reverse question that I did with Sue, is if you weren't doing general practice, is there any particular area that you think you might have done?
Allergy medicine, nutrition medicine, obstetrics, skin cancer medicine, and geriatrics. No, as I said right at the start, Charles, I mean, I just get addicted to the variety and the excitement and the range of things that I get to see. I see something new every week that I can never get bored with. And I mean, I just looked, before this started, I just looked at my list today of the types of patients that I saw, and it would make a large city teaching hospital look like one of the summary of the whole of their outpatients clinics. But these people live here, and they're not going to go to those outpatients clinic every day. So we have to understand it. We have to learn it. So I can't think of anything that would be as exciting, to be honest. I mean, I actually respect Sue's position as a general surgeon. I think it's actually quite similar in that area. That to be a hyper specialist, it must be really sexy to know everything about something. Sometimes I kind of ache for that confidence that I do know, but by golly, after that, where else do you go? So whereas from our position, there is always another area that they haven't explored yet. I'm thinking about setting up an allergy clinic again. I did, when I was a registrar in Dampier, I set up the Western Australia's only non-urban allergy clinic for the whole of the state, or at least for the whole of the Northern Pilbara. And because you can do that, there wasn't a service, nobody was going to do it. So as a registrar, I said, well, I think I'm interested in this. I think I'll set it up. So you research it, you do it, and it's a service that people wouldn't have had otherwise. That was great. Better than flying 1,500 kilometres to Perth to understand your allergy.
That comment is germane to a discussion I was just having today. Is I don't think that, no, I don't think, I know there's not an allergist between the Gold Coast and Sydney. You're ideally positioned to launch again as the Midway Allergy Clinic, and as soon as anybody found out about it, you'd probably be swamped.
Yeah, well, look, it's actually fun. I do a webinar every year for the Remote Vocational Training Scheme on allergy, and it frustrates me that it's a really poorly taught subject in medical schools, and it's a relatively ignored subject in postgraduate training, and yet it's a really, really common problem, and it's anything from a simple minor issue to a life-threatening issue for a lot of people. So anyway, that's just one of my passions and interests. Unfortunately, time is a little bit challenged because, as I said, we've got the COVID pop-up clinic, and that's occupying about 30% of our day, or at least it's added an extra 30% onto the day we already had. But that's pretty exciting, and it brings the whole population together. The fact that we've done it as GPs, we didn't have health department support, we didn't have federal government support. We just got up and said, in February, we need to do this before it's too late, and so we set it up and did it ourselves. And the health department came in later.
I think that's an absolutely typical example of the kind of things that you can do in rural medicine. Identify something that needs to be done. You have a certain freedom of scope, a bit far away from central control, to be able to do what needs to be done, or acquire, as Danny's done, acquire skills that you require for that particular place. I think, across the board here, everybody has done exactly that, courtesy of their rural practice, looked at what needs doing, adjusted what they can do, not been really, channeled by anybody else, or, requirements of some central body, and been able to create an interesting and really interesting and satisfying career to do. I think that's one of the fantastic opportunities of practicing in rural areas. You're a little bit away from that central control. It gives you a freedom of operation that you don't otherwise have, and an opportunity to pursue your own interests, to whatever degree. And you can always move back to, if Danny had decided he wanted to become a full-time anaesthetist, probably could have done that. Just said, well, that's, really where my interest lies, and leave the general practice part of it aside and do only anaesthetics. I know people who've done that. So that it just leaves opportunities open everywhere, I think, apart from being an endlessly interesting and fascinating way to practice.
Charles, can I interrupt a second?
Sure.
Just like you were saying about the community's needs can drive you to different interests, I found for myself that wherever I was interested, or wherever I was at a point in my life, and were interested in something because of my own personal life, that I could drive my career that way. So when I was pregnant and having babies, I was delivering a ton of women and taking care of a lot of small children. And now I'm, taking care of a lot of menopausal women. And, but also find it, I had a skin cancer, and that found interest in skin cancer, and then have gone on to, learn lots about melanoma and detecting melanoma, and also then palliative care. Although I haven't, as we get older, we all have people in our lives who pass away, but then how does that look with respect, and how can you help provide passionate or compassionate palliative care in someone's home because they can't go to a hospice or a hospital to pass away. So I found that a really wonderful thing is that where I am in my life and what I'm interested in, you can sort of become a mini specialist in that, and then and that can change over time.
Getting back to palliative care, I think some of the most gratifying experiences I've had is from the families of people who have had a relative whose death I've managed really well. They're incredibly grateful for being able to manage that in such a way that their relative feels like they were understood, that the pain control was good, they were able to spend time with their family, all of those sorts of things. And it's actually a very rewarding area of practice, I think. Probably underdone in training, but certainly an area that is wide open for people to get into. So I'm not quite sure how I ask for feedback from the rest of the audience, but I've been having a great time, and I'm re-inspired by talking to everybody. Is there anybody, how do we do this with the chat line? Anne-Marie, so Trevor knows somebody. anybody in the audience there that's got any questions or any comments they'd like to make on, what you've heard? I hope you're all going to rush out and do rural medicine now. So I can't see anything coming up on the chat line. Well, there's always a risk of dragging things on too long. But has anybody got any words of wisdom that they'd like to hand on? Start with you, Trevor.
Hey, Charles. Yeah, I just saw that Stephanie has put up a question. Is it necessary to do a lot of travel to complete training? I've got 2 school-age children, so trying to manage. Yeah, and Stephanie, yeah, that is a big deal. Having a really supportive partner helps. Not everybody has the partner to go along with them. I had 2 kids in medical school, and so when we went up to Dampier and Karratha, of course, the whole family came with me. So you can take that as a positive or a negative. My wife found work in a whole pile of different ways while she was in Dampier and living in Karratha, and the kids went to a fantastic little primary school while we're there. Yes, we did have to travel to get there, but we had a fantastic and wild experience while we were there and saw parts of Australia we never would have otherwise done. And we met some really, really interesting people that have remained friends. So the flip side is that I can remember when I was in medical school and then when I was doing my registrar training, I would hear lots of other graduates and students say, oh, you don't want to go to the country. When will we get back to the medical library? Or as Sue pointed out, it'll kill your career and you won't actually get the experience. And in fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's instead of being locked into a predictable and routine lifestyle, we get to do lots of really wild and great stuff and interesting stuff. I saw, even as a medical student, I saw so much more by doing country terms. And then as a registrar, I did some amazing stuff that consolidated all the learning and actually made the exams relatively easy. I hope that's not sounding too cocky, but I actually enjoyed the RSCGP exams because it was doing stuff that I was doing every day from every aspect of the body and biosocial medicine. So it actually was an advantage, and their family had a lot of stuff to do as well. There are some remote areas where it would be pretty challenging to take young kids. But again, it really depends a bit on what you make of that and what the makeup of your family is. I know there are a lot of country towns that are desperate to get doctors out there or even training doctors, and they try and make it really attractive for you. So you might be surprised. So in summary, do you have to do a lot of travel? Yeah. Is that a bad thing? I'd say no. It depends on how you take it.
Yes, Stephanie, I'll have a crack at answering that as well. So having had a fair sort of background with the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine training thing and understanding very well what happens with general practice training through the Australian General Practice Training Program, you seem to be obliged to move every 6 months and up sticks and move your entire family. That I think is not the right thing to do. The College of Rural and Remote Medicine doesn't require you to move every 6 months, despite what your training organisation may have told you. If you can find a nice spot which is covering off on the range of things that you need to do and gives you the capacity to see the types of patients that you need to see to get the local experience, have some hospital involvement along the way, there is no need for you to shift from town to town as part of your training. I happen to think that that's actually the wrong thing to do. If you, as just about everybody here has done, find that place where you feel like you fit and it's nice to work, you really want to stay there. If you're allowed to do that, the community is going to get someone that sticks. And I am fairly strongly in favour of the idea of allowing people to find ways of doing their training in the one place if they can. On the other hand, I'd have to agree with Trevor. To a certain extent, you solve the problems that you need to solve of shifting your family from here to there. it provides everybody, including your children, with absolutely wonderful experience that can last them the rest of their life. So it's not something that you should necessarily shy away from. I think one of the things that people worry about most is whether their children will get adequately educated. I kind of feel that that's an exaggerated worry in a family where the parents are passionately interested in information and education and that sort of thing. You know, your kids are going to learn everything from you anyway. And if you provide that kind of thing at home, I'm not convinced that the school environment is as important as everybody thinks. There we go. That's my personal take on it. Find a place to stick. There's nothing wrong with that. Travel is always better in retrospect, I guess, but it is a fantastic thing to do for the entire family. Spouses may be the most difficult to shift, I guess.
Can I jump in there? I would, really echo what, Charles, what you've said. I think, and you'll find that if you find a practice in a town that suits you, and they'll move heaven and earth to try and keep you. I think you'll find, and they'll negotiate with the college on your behalf. So I think the biggest issue is probably is your partner, really. Like all of us, you know, our partners have to be happy. So it's a choice you make together as a rule. And I've been fortunate in that we've both been very happy here. So yeah, I would really sort of echo what you said. And the education is an issue, I know, for some people. And we found we gave our kids the choice of if they wanted to go off to boarding school or not. And actually, our daughter did briefly go to boarding school but didn't like it, and our son never wanted to go, so that was easy. And our son just went up the road to the high school and did quite well. Did science at Sydney Uni, and then made the decision he wanted to do medicine. So, and now he's in Brisbane, and in fact he's now thinking about doing psychiatry. So there you go. And these days, you know, the universities, there's a you do get a bonus if you come from the country. So I don't think it's a disadvantage, you know, especially with the opportunities online that are involved and the quality of schools in the country. I think you'll find that is not really an issue, maybe like it used to be in the past where all the kids got packed off to boarding school.
And as probably the person on the panel that's done the most shifting across the widest variety of things, what's your take on staying in place or moving?
Well, I think the biggest sacrifice for us was that my husband was an engineer in the United States and couldn't find work as an engineer in the within 45-minute drive of here. So he made the decision to be a stay-at-home dad. And now that both of my kids are at uni, I think that was the best thing that for our family that could have happened. The kids also stayed in the small high school here rather than going the 1-hour drive to Lismore for a private school. That was more a function of they get car sick than a function of us making any other kind of conscious choice. But I also think that was the best decision, because what effectively happens is that we have become so embedded in this community. You know, Craig was the head of the PNC and really involved at the school, and I live 2 blocks from where I work, and you know, the kids went to school in town. So the health of the community is not just what someone's HbA1c. It's like, this is my neighbor and I care about my neighbor, and I need to help them figure out how to access care in a seemingly non-personal world of the ED and the hospital. And I need to advocate that for them because they're teaching my kid how to play soccer on Sunday. So I think there are changes and sacrifices that you make, but in hindsight, it was completely worth it. And I think our children are so much more balanced and happy because they had one parent who could stay home with them, which wouldn't have happened if we'd stayed anyplace else, because we both had careers and we were busy, and they were basically daycare kids or latchkey kids, and we weren't home 10 hours a day. So, and now how fantastic that their dad got to do every field trip, and, you know, it was great. So I think what you might initially perceive as a sacrifice actually becomes the strength. And it also becomes the strength of staying in the community, because I know all these people now walking down the street. I've taken care of them, or my kids have gone to school with them or whatever for 10 years. And my investment in this community to be healthy is, you know, much, much higher than if I lived in a bigger place. Even Ballina, I wouldn't have that same level of connection.
Thanks very much, Anne. Look, it's that's coming up for 8 o'clock, and I think you know, I'm starting to get weary about after an hour of this sort of stuff. But thank you for all the people that joined, and particularly thank you, Anne, Trevor, Danny, Sue, for sharing your insights and experiences. Even if nobody else enjoyed it, I most certainly did. Thank you again.